First I introduce myself. I'm Derk Diekema. I'm an artist and director of the Art and Heat Foundation. We work together with the Bierumer School to, in this case for this artist resident program. And together we invited Chih Chung Chang from Kaohsiung, Taiwan. And he was here in the last 2 months. And today is the opening of his exhibition. So Cici, maybe you can introduce yourself next.
And okay, I just keep saying it. And yeah, I'm Chih Chung Chang. Usually we put our family name in the front, so but usually it's a bit difficult to be pronounced. So also Yanda usually call me Cici, and it's quite a grateful chance to come here to have this residency in Bierumer School, and it's also kind of a further step from my previous residencies in Yangpan Academy in Masli. So it's actually for me quite an interesting experience to kind of proceed my project that you can later see upstairs in the different weather conditions and different seasons. And actually I'm from Kaohsiung, Taiwan, which is a harbor city that is very close to the sea and close to the international culture. So that's also for me quite an interesting opportunity to use some of these, I would say, Dutch historical factors or elements that has already interwoven with East Asian cultures, namely Taiwan, Japan, China, and elsewhere, that to see this kind of, I would say, not just historical connection, but also some like international creative connection nowadays.
It's also how we met. So we met actually in 2018 in the Pier 2 Art Center in Kaohsiung. And
18
or 19.
I think it's 9.
Yeah, 19.
Right
Just before COVID.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. And there we had long talks about also the colonial history and the role that the Dutch played in Taiwan. And we will also get back to this because it's a part of your work. But for now it's maybe good to explain a little bit about how we sit, because it has a certain meaning.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So I'll just give a brief introduction because later we are going to eat. Yeah. That's the most important part in, I would say, in our culture. Here, our means not only East Asian culture, but I would say maybe for all Chinese speaking community that lives worldwide. This is a very common setup for us to have foods, especially for Chinese New Year, which can be considered the Christmas here. It's actually our most important festival or most important day of the year that we have all reunions with friends, families for sure. And you can also see it's actually pretty much like a stage that we already put all the bowls, all the foods in the ways of a circle, and from the center is the main dish, and all the food surrounding is something that we are going to cook and eat together. So this is pretty much in the form of participatory work that we are going to eat, we are going to cook, and we are going to talk, and we can also, I mean, the most important part, to share the food together, because that's something we do. For example, I will serve food for someone when I see he's probably craving for some warm soup or for some tofu or something like that, and that's actually how we create this connection, how we interact with each other.
So we will do this after we've been upstairs. So to your exhibition, the title is Sun Shower. Very specific title. Can you maybe explain what the sun shower is and means, and why you chose it?
Okay, I think first of all, I got this idea that flashing into my mind is because Sun Shower is a very, very important exhibition that was organized and curated by the very famous Japanese curator in Mori Museum in Japan, which is also a very renowned art museum years ago. And that's actually an exhibition that revolved with Japanese perspective of how the whole Asian Pacific communities, and they invited all the contemporary artists from East Asia and Southeast Asia, and also part of Oceania, to have the show. And the title is Sun Shower. So this kind of gave me a very involving feeling of how Japan used this term to create this community framework and to create this shared imagination of how the Pan-Asian Pacific community can be all together. I think that's very interesting to talk about because here in Europe, we always talk about EU kind of like for granted. It's something people consider very natural, but actually, I would say it's actually not that universal thing. So for me, it's an interesting starting point to talk about Sun Shower on this context. And then when I dive into these words, it's also because when I moved to the Netherlands, my body actually has a lot of reactions and adjustments on the weather and climate here. Even though we are not, the weather here in the Netherlands is known for very wet and very bad, but still, I mean, it's quite interesting to make me feel that it's wet, but it's not that kind of humidity that I usually have in so-called monsoon climates or monsoon Asia, because that's another like intense circulation of water. So also the rain here, I once talked to an Indonesian friend. He said, I think he's kind of making fun of this. He said, you see the rain here in the Netherlands is so weak. So weak, so like, because, I mean, of course there are storms, but I can kind of imagine like in Indonesia, they have this kind of extremely strong, intense rainfall. So you really need to hide somewhere to get rid of totally wetness. And started from there, I started to put more of my intention on this because I got this trajectory to come to the Netherlands because I'm very interested in maritime culture, about the ship, about the harbor, and that's also why I get to know Derk. And then from there, I also noticed that the network of maritime culture is a form, but then when people travel, there's actually much more like I would say intimate or personal experience that could be explored in this way. So that's why I started to think about if I come here, or what if there's a Dutch people traveling to East Asia? We all know this wet culture, wet weather, but how can we deal with that? And when I dive into that, it kind of opened another door for me to see like, I also for that the sun shower in Flemish. Thanks Jan for helping me figure out the detail because really I don't know that much about Flemish and the difference of Flemish and Dutch. And there's actually words in Flemish, and I never make it to pronounce it. It's Diebelspeer in English.
Like juifels. Sweet.
Yeah. But anyways, I get to know this word because I think it's from Antwerp to describe the weather, and then there's no such words in Dutch vocabularies, and that kind of impressed me. And from there, I also noticed that it's actually a worldwide thing that in different continents, in different cultures, they all have totally different understanding or imagination of what sun showers means. So for example, later you can also see part of the story.
What is a sun shower?
Sun shower. Sun shower is when it's a sunny weather, but still the rain falls from the sky.
So it's sunny and rainy
And rain
at
at the same time. Yeah.
That's what you call sun shower. And I
Sun
think in
shower.
Flemish it was een duivelskermis.
Okay.
Something
Yes.
like this.
Uh,
Well, thank you. Now we know what a sun shower is, and that it's connected to
Can I
several
ask you,
cultures. Of
what
course.
is it
Yeah.
for you? What is the sun shower for you? What does it mean for you?
Sun shower, for example, for me it's something magical, I would say, because in our in my personal like childhood experience, and also like everyday experience in a way, sun shower is something that we usually have, not every day, but maybe quite often in the summer, and specifically in the afternoon, just because of this climate thing. Like in the afternoon, we always have like strong rain, and that rain is too strong that you cannot use umbrella or raincoat to protect yourself from getting wet. And so for me, that's something very beautiful, but also in, I would say not Chinese, but Taiwanese idioms, there's a word, there are this kind of concepts that they call this rain the white rain or pale rain. And when this rain comes, that also means it foretells that there's going to be a stronger storm coming. But the storm for us, it's another interesting idea, like just like typhoon or hurricane in the American region. Storms or typhoon, that means that brings all the water that we need. So that brings harvest, that
Yeah.
brings abundance. But at the same time, of course, it destroys everything. It can destroy your house just with the winds. And also, I made some projects before about harbor that a typhoon, not even to be the most terrible one, that can already destroy the harbor, just like Rotterdam.
Right.
So that's also something for me, interesting idea to think about, like what that means as a sun shower or what that foretells.
It's for you also, like you work a lot with historical backgrounds and stories, and also you are interested in how in different cultures all over the world people deal with, for example, the same weather phenomenon, like the sun shower. Is it for you something which is important for your work and maybe also for this exhibition? How hello. Is it also for you important in your work, like how cultures deal different with climate or with
Yeah, I think that's the thing that need another hour to read that into, but that's always something that for me very interested in, because I started with this practices that related to the maritime culture, because I believe that it created another layers of imagination that the world or the idea of world is not bounded to the land, but bounded to the waters. And through the water could be the barriers if you cannot swim. But water can be also the rules if you know how to swim and you know how to sail. So I like this, double-faced metaphors of how water generates this global understanding of our shared environments. Because, like when we talk about sea level rise, yeah, of course, here in the Netherlands, which is a lowland country, people take it super seriously and dikes are built and a lot of practices are proceeded. But also, the sea or the so-called sea level is never even. So when it comes to the concern of sea level rise, actually in the Pacific Ocean, especially in the western part of the Pacific Ocean, the sea level rise will be maybe double serious than that will be happening here in Europe. So that's another thing for me to think about in a metaphorical way, that if the sea, we think it should be the horizon, should be a ruler that for us to look at things, could also be not real, even, or not real horizontal. Then how can we look at each other? Because I think that's a very important part, as I feel like Taiwan is a small island of immigrants. We have a lot of immigrants, but it's far from international compared to the Netherlands. And I came here to get to meet more this kind of international communities with different races and colors, and also to really highlight these differences in cultures, which could be either go with conflict, but also go with this mutual understanding and resonation. I think that's, for me, a very important, interesting part.
You just talked about, you mentioned the dike, which is only a few, not so far away from the Bierumer School. I also wonder how, like, the village of Bierum and the environment where we are now and where you stayed, you built up this work. Is it influenced your work or your way of thinking, or did it brought you something special? What can you
I think there are three different layers of it. I think first of all is the first moment I came to the Netherlands 2 years ago, I came to Maastricht, which is the highest place of the Netherlands, and it's also the southernmost part of the Netherlands. And I literally moved from the southernmost part to the northernmost part, and also to go kind of down into the water, and to really see from a hilly part of the country that people cares more about. I would say they cares maybe a bit less about this thinking of water, because they do have rivers and do have canals, but that is not the main part of the urban plan. But here, all the lands used to be the water, and people feel the region and to make lands from it. And this whole process is actually kind of create this imagination of myself, heading north and heading from this kind of. It also created this almost a parallel experience that I have in Taiwan, because Taiwan has a lot of mountains, and we go from the center of the country, which is a lot of mountains, to the coast. I have this kind of, surreal feelings of my direction moving this direction, and also the weather is getting cold, because I was there and I had another excursion in June, which is super, not just warm, it's super hot in the early summer, and then I came here in the very cold and wet winter.
Yeah.
So it kind of also created this shift of locations, shift of temperatures, weathers, shift of the whole environment. And for me, it's also interesting too, because of the dike here. We didn't just ride the bike around there, but also I walked there several times to see. I know there's a double bike infrastructure facilities, and trying to grow something there. And that's also something for me to kind of step further of on this understanding of how we live with water. And that's also something interesting for me to go with this project that deal with submerge the water, deal with this change of temperature, feeling of temperature, and dealing with this potential connection of Europe from the maybe safe place or safe position to somewhere that is actually a bit of triggering or uncomfortable. And that's something I'm working with.
You,
Well, maybe that's
no, you can.
okay.
Ask
Yeah, I
the
was
question.
wondering if you're talking about the concept of a sun shower, which seems to be very deeply rooted in your culture. And you've moved here to the Netherlands, talked a lot about water, different changes. I was wondering if the concept of a sun shower also has changed or adapted for you. Now you've seen different parts of what it is. And maybe this is not the right season, but we do have, it feels to me, a concept of a sun shower as well, but maybe different than in Taiwan. And I was wondering if that concept has changed for you.
For the first part that impressed me the most is that because there's no such term in Dutch, then I think.
But I do get the concept.
Yeah, but previously I think I talked to Paul and Berlina, and we got the guess that's because this weather is so common here, so people don't really need a word to describe that. And that's actually something for me very interesting. Like, yeah, maybe something for us quite precious or quite extraordinary could be just a common thing for another culture. And I mean vice versa. It could relates to a lot of different things. And I can also come back to the idea of sun shower because Taiwan has also been so influenced by the Japanese culture, and they have a totally different understanding of sun shower as a folkloric story that fox are having when fox is having a wedding, and they need to have this parade from the wife's house to the husband's house. And but because fox they know magic and they just want to hide their past, so they create a shower in the sunny day to hide their traces from the attention of human. And they create another layers of imagination of how people deal with this weather and deal with maybe the environment and also the potential animals. And I would say not animals but lives, but also this could be like philosophical or religious idea that because Japanese like Shintoism or in general some part of East Asian culture is based on animism. So it believes life lives in everything. So I mean to have this idea that foxes have this power is also a form of animism, I suppose. So yeah, there's actually a lot of interesting idea that confront each other in this way.
So is this also something you want to expand upon in different regions in the world?
Yeah.
To see other cultures, how they deal with it?
Yeah, I think that's actually something for me quite satisfying.
To continue with, like comparing cultures or let's say how cultures meet. In your research, you were focusing a lot on a Dutch guy, Hendrik Hamel. Maybe it's good that you will explain who he is and also how he was maybe partly the starting point maybe of your research of this exhibition.
Okay.
Maybe you can first, I don't think that most people actually know who Hendrik Hamel is, because I didn't know to begin with as well.
Yeah.
So it would be
Okay,
nice
yeah.
to make this.
Okay, and then Derk Diekema is someone who is quite a Dutch guy who is rather famous in the Netherlands, or in Korea. And I get to know him in Korea as well because I went to a conference and some exhibition, and I get to know even some curators use him as a concept to curate some kind of rotating residencies before in the Netherlands. So I get to know him and figure out the stories of his quite interesting because he is also entitled in Korea as a Dutch Marco Polo at sea because he's the one who's actually not a real, but he was considered one that is written in records that discovered the Korean peninsula in 17th century. And it's also, some like information about this guy. He's a very young bookkeeper around his early 20s, working for BOC. When he traveled from Gorkum, yeah, that's his hometown, yeah, and he worked for BOC, and then he traveled to Batavia, now it's Jakarta, Indonesia, lived there for more than 1 year, and then on one of his travel business trip to Diekema, which is Japan, because that's also the time when Japan only opened a part of the country to the world to have trade and some other things because it's still an enclosed country back then. But it's also almost the same overlap duration that Taiwan was discovered by, not discovered, but more or less like partially occupied by Dutch. But I think Taiwan, it's really a lot of information to tell about. Taiwan was then occupied in the southern part by Dutch, and they
Where
also.
are you from? Kaichun.
No, Tainan.
Tainan.
It's only for like 3 to 4 decades, so it's actually not real colony, but more or less like a trade station. So, so Taiwan at that time for Hendrik Hamel is just a starting point. They stop by there and put on some storages and
And on the way to Japan, you stop in Taiwan.
from Batavia
Yeah,
to
Batavia,
Taiwan, and then to Taiwan to Japan. That's the original plan.
And what happened?
And there's a storm, could be typhoon because in August, and then they are not lucky enough, so the ship capsized.
Yeah.
But he's again lucky enough to survive, and he get ashore with some other crews from the ship, which is called the gesprek. I think it's a kind of birds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they get ashore, and then they were found by the local people who were actually the residents in Jeju Island. Now, previously it's called crabbags, another Dutch word, but nowadays it's Jeju Islands of Korea. So then they were taken as a hostage, and then brought to Seoul at that time, which is Joseon Empire, as same as the Japanese one, which is still enclosed. So that's why they were forbidden to leave, and these crew members, including Derk Diekema from Bierumer, were forced to stay and live in Korea for 13 years until they get another ship and escape and back to Diekema in Japan and follow same routes back to the Netherlands. And because he was a bookkeeper, so he wrote thoroughly all his personal stories, including the sea journal when he was sailing, and also all what he has seen, maybe in a more like marvelous way, that what he has seen in Korea. Then I think it's not himself, but DOC published the book, and then the book became the bestseller of that time in the Netherlands. So he was then become a very important writer. So this is the whole story I started with, and also I show some of the pages that you can read through about the upstairs.
This is maybe a good moment.
To share a bit of the
Well,
and because as I mentioned, it's a very long story, and when it comes to Derk Diekema, what impressed me is not about his discovery of Korea, because for me that's really not important. But for me, it's about how his life kind of transformed or changed by this tragedy, by this accident, that he turned from maybe a normal bookkeeper to a so-called Dutch Marco Polo in Korea. So I started from this idea of how water, is kind of ritualized thing, like you get in water and you kind of reborn in something else. So I started from this and also put in these ideas of like climate studies and some of this contemporary context into this whole story. So actually it's a long-term process of myself researching on theme and all these related subjects. So I started with water, that I think water could be interesting factors or elements to talk about the story instead of just read a book or watch a video on it. So you can see there's actually a lot of images here, and they are those research materials that I have collected, and I try to use something water sensitive, that you can use water to reveal the information in this way. But it's actually a very simple mechanism. It's just a white pen and it turns transparent when it's wet. But this is already enough for me to think about how water can be an interactive or maybe a waste of natural or random materials that is not controlled or not manipulated by just artists, but just something that emerged itself. So yeah,
the printed pictures or maps, what do they tell? Do they show your research, or do they tell story about Derk Diekema?
Oh yeah, okay.
A little bit about
This is the one that you can also see on the newspaper. This is the route of Derk Diekema's journey from Taiwan. At some point, it's very close to China because of the wind. And then on his way, originally to Japan, then it capsized here. So this is the map. And this is the original book cover of his publishing. And this is some of the old maps in coastal area of southeastern part of China. That, of course, Taiwan is not part of it, but that's actually a very potential route of Diekema that travel from the west to the east. And also some other images. For example, this is the Japanese myth about this idea of mirage. I haven't checked if there's a word of mirage in Dutch. Because mirage, I think, is something very connected to also like the American culture.
That's something to research.
Yeah, and so there's actually a lot of different layers of it, and yeah, that's quite a lot, and I cannot really talk them through. But if you later have interests, this will be here. Anyone can use it to figure out what you want to see, and random. And if you have any questions, you can just reach me, and we can talk. Okay.
And CC, shall we invite the people now to go to your installation?
But can I ask a question?
Of course.
Why did you choose, I don't know, of course we need to reveal the information, but why did you choose these pictures, and what story did you put inside in this? How should you randomly open up the information, or you have a logic? Why did you choose this kind of pictures? What would you like to give to viewer, when he's going from one picture to another? There is a story that you need to understand, or this is just, because it's like like there is maps, there is some book cover, or like a page from book, how is it connected?
It's for me more of idea that I don't really deliver those information thoroughly clearly here. Like I would say it's a really long process that I've been working for more than 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually hundreds of information and images or something, documents that have been collected,
Mm-hmm.
and I just chose those one. For me, it's more like maybe triggering, or in a way, it's also more of understandable or interesting images. For example, some images that is already clearly related to my culture. That could be very different from people can see here. So that could raise some kind of question and curiosity. But also for some kind of images like map, that is a very universal thing. That is something that we don't even need to talk, but you can already kind of see, okay, this is a story that relates to this idea of maps and also about traveling. And when there's this is actually like a satellite map or a new map that can relate to maybe more of a contemporary context. And that's the original idea, but yes, also I received some suggestions from Derk and yeah, anyways, to maybe put some more information here, but today we don't have that much time. So yeah, we're going to start it from here, and as long as I'm here, I'm very open to talk with all the details and the stories.
Yeah.
So what effect would you like to people? I mean, this is the start of the exhibition, right? So you start here, and then, so what your intention? What people should, I don't know, get from this room or from this? Because for me, this is interesting for me.
The first part, it could be just the idea of water that plays the most important role of this project.
Mm-hmm.
That water is already kind of an advertised material that we talk. I mean, it's in the story. Water is everywhere. We talk about water, sea, ocean all the time. But then when water is in your hands and the water is surrounding you, or water in somewhere, then for me that's actually another layer of understanding of that object or that matters. And so I just use water as kind of invitation that people can use it to start to get to know me and know about this project.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part of the decision that I made to have this setup is another thing I've been questioning myself for some time as an artist, especially as a research-based artist, that how can we expect the audience to be thoroughly, understanding what art is going to do, and how can you imagine a research to have a thorough picture of the subject? Is that possible? And if it's not, how can I deal with that? Because when I do research, in a way, I think the potential motive is that maybe I would like to reach something true, something clear, then I can make it into a work, or I can represent it in a certain way. But it's also during my past years studying research on waters and all with other friends in Yangfan A, I also came to this idea that we, as an artist or even as a researcher or scientist, you can never really understand a thing thoroughly. It's not possible. We are constantly discovering new things, and there's just so many random factors surrounding us that either help us or block or like stop us or interrupt us from reaching the truths that we demand, that we expect. So I started with the idea that if I really use water as a material, or as a matter, then how can I imagine that water is really the natural matter, that somehow it's beyond my control or beyond my arrangement. So that's why I try to leave some empty space of an artist. This is not the thing that artist is that thing, but more of that for all the visitors, for all the people who come into this place, they were invited to do this, but I don't expect anyone to really see everything through or understand everything through, because I don't think that's necessary. But also for me, this participation of the audience is important, so they can do that, and that's a point. And the second part is that what, for me, that's equally important that they found something and they didn't find something. Those things, those missing part is also important.
Yeah, and I also think the material you use to paint, and also water, it comes back in your installation. So what you already experience here as the visitor, you will see how you use it as an artist in the installation. So for me, there's a connection also with materials, meaning and revealing something which can be explored or will be gone if you pay attention. Yeah. Is it a good moment to go upstairs?
Yes.
And
So
then shall we say in half an hour we end up here at the table?
okay.
For 20 minutes?
Yeah, 20 minutes.
So what is the time now?
10 past.
So I have a last question. Sorry. So how do you connect the phenomenon of sun shower and the word and the story that you tell us, the written story, and how do you about Dutch Marco Polo, and how do you connect those things? It's just what is this story? Why this story is a part of exhibition? And
I can give a brief introduction
Yeah.
of that.
I mean,
it's more like a framework.
just your
the
brief
word is there, you can see through it, you can see it yourself. But the original concept is that I read through his book and I noticed that he did mention about Taiwan, but really just in several paragraphs. It's actually nothing mentioned before the ship capsized. So for me, it's a shit. So I decided to kind of fill in something in this void, in this emptiness. That it's actually good because that also kind of resonates with this image of Taiwan nowadays. It's a very it happens for 400 years ago, but the situation has never changed for us in this way. Or I would say it repeats the situation nowadays. Taiwan has finally becoming known by the world, actually in quite recent years, because maybe decades ago people really don't hear about this island or don't know about this island, and so many people mistake Taiwan as Thailand all the time, even nowadays too. Yeah, and now this item kind of gain its attention, gain its importance, but at the same time, there's a lot of things for Taiwanese to deal with. I mean, from like my Taiwanese perspective, that we again, finally get chance to connect to the world. And what should we do? And should we, because it's also a lot of reflection on our situation, that we have this threat from across the strait, across the water, but at the same time we have, you can say we have lost all the connections with the world for some time. So it's also a very important period of time for us to rebuild it. And how we rebuild it is the most important part. So we are not rebuilding the connection just with the Nathans, but with elsewhere. But also, I saw it. Yeah, for example, like next year, I can have this example for you. Taiwan is going to celebrate the 400 years anniversary of so-called Taiwanese-Dutch cultural exchange. And we have actually, I also went to the events that was taken place in the Taiwanese embassy in The Hague. And also there's a lot of Dutch historians and artists presenting. And they always have this question, as long as the Dutch society nowadays pay more attention to this colonial history that people don't really feel happy about, and why Taiwan, considered as a settlement or in forms of colony, would like to celebrate that.
Yeah.
And we start with this interesting discussion about, being a Taiwanese, we don't really put ourselves in this colonial context, but more in a different ways. Just like during COVID, Taiwan actually used our medical technologies and resources to help a lot of countries in the world. And they have this slogan like Taiwan can help. And for these things, I mean, for me, and also for some Taiwanese people, we also think that when you talk about this, structure of power or this idea of coloniality, then you already create an imbalance out there. But I mean, for us, especially now in Taiwan, which is also quite a positively democratic society, we tend to try to achieve more of equality, not just in gender, not just in culture, in different races, but also in this kind of thing. I think it's also a very creative way, that being once could be considered as a colonies or a land that was deprived by the colonizers. Can we use a more confident way to treat each other or to talk to each other?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually our national strategy nowadays in Taiwan. Yeah.
Could you also sort of echo this into what we will do after we see the work? So we continue on the table with everybody talking, because then there's a lot of opportunities to continue talking and ask questions. I think it's nice also to see the work and then continue with a lot of questions, but you already have one, so I think it's good that you ask now and then we go upstairs, because there's still food and a lot of things to do.
I was wondering, could you say that water, which is like a very important part in all life, that you're using it in your work as like sort of a universal conductor to create this kind of bond for global cultural exchange? Is that what you're trying to do maybe a bit?
I think conductor could be a very good idea of that, or also in forms of catalyst, this kind of thing. But also for myself, it's a constant, pursuit of that, because I started with this idea of American culture, because I think that it's directly connected to my personal background living in the harbor city, and I was enlightened about sailing when I was in Norway. That's a far away place from that, and I had you can say like my personal reason to starting with that, because of my father working in the harbor. I started with this establishment of mutual understanding between generations and disciplines because they will never understand what artists are doing. So this is a way for me to start this idea of water, and from there I try to expand this discussion or these realms that we can focus on water. So that's why we go from this very physical, very direct imagination of water to a more like invisible or to more like indirect understanding of water. But also, when I was having my presentation back then, also I was questioned by another Egyptian friend. She asked me that even now I talk about climate, I talk about weather, I talk about using the water, still water is something outside of us, and it's still like outside my body. But the truth is like there are 70% of our body is water. So I think this is also something that I'm constantly thinking, that we all know that, and we all know that that is actually a very, very important part of understanding. I mean, after all, we are all humans, so everything comes from ourselves. So maybe at some moments I will come back to understanding how water within us that manipulates or that elaborates ourselves. But I think it's just a step by step so far. I don't know if I answered the question.
Well, it's actually interesting that you. My question was if it brings global cultural change for you, but you actually downsize it back to life itself and your personal exchange. It's very interesting to me, actually.
Yeah, because I think when we talk about like this global awareness or globalization or this kind of internationality, I think it's a picture or that's a term that is rather abstract. And I think what else in the Bible, I mentioned a bit about that with Derk, that it's actually quite interesting to see, like we already have this metaphysical understanding of the world, but when it comes to something in person, how can you deal with that? If it's a conflict, or if it is some rooted differences that we cannot deal with. And I think this kind of situation also caused a great impact on myself understanding that. And yeah, as long as this Egyptian friend asked me this, another Indonesian friend asked me another idea of this, I think this is already this process of becoming international. Because I don't like it's just like a words there that we are achieving, but instead of just living it, I mean that's is more important for me.
Thank you.
Can I have one small remark? Because you talk about sun shower and phenomena, and it's a very pragmatic question maybe, but I didn't hear the word rainbow. And the rainbow is the most important thing that happens. It's water, it's water which has colors.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing that happens here. So we don't talk about sun shower anything, we just talk about, oh, there is a rainbow, so probably it's raining. Or sometimes it's raining, and, oh, probably there is a rainbow.
Yeah.
And it's a shower, it's okay, it's a shower comes from the sun, but there's the rainbow, and it's a very visual phenomenon. It's the most important thing about
and it's much more marvelous, I would say. Rainbow is just like just spectacular.
people can see, wow, I know all kind of stories about it, that there should be a public goal or so.
Yeah.
You try to go there, you're never able to get there.
I think
Sometimes there are two.
in actually Paul and Rina also asked me this, like why I choose sunshine instead of rainbow. And I think for me, because rainbow is already super famous, and it's already been used to kind of refer to so many different meanings. And but also for me, that's a very obvious spectacle out there that we can easily recognize. But for me, just like what I mentioned about those stories from different cultural contexts, sunshine is something like, it's something happening instead of something out there. So people create stories based on it. And I like it is something in between, instead of just a clear result, a clear a miracle that we project ourselves on.
So it's also more poetic in this way, maybe. It becomes more poetic in this way.
Yeah.
It's something like you cannot deal with a sunset because it has to talk too much, too many times already. That's what you mean.
Yeah.
Let's take all these chairs and then we can come back here for.
We need to leave this room.
Yeah, you lead the way.